Thanks so much for staying with Morning Live. We've been on your screen since 4 o'clock, an exciting, not 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Felt like 4, but it was 5, okay? I'll take back that extra hour. Anyway, what is the time? It's 8 o'clock, and it has been. I don't know if they're more exciting elections, and certainly when it comes to the United States, they pull out all of the punches to make it into exciting elections, whether we're talking star power or anything that's associated with it. Your United States presidential candidates, Democrats Kamala Harris and Republican Donald Trump, do everything they can to get at least 270 Electoral College votes to win that race to the White House. The next president will have to deal with many, many issues, and these are issues that we are discussing here on the program. But as it stands right now, with what's being called, it looks like Donald Trump needs 23 more of those college votes to be in the hot seat and to take up occupancy of the presidency. According to these results that we've got so far, the sweet spot is 270 to win. Donald Trump has 247 and Kamala Harris has 210. We're talking now about some of the foreign affairs issues, and this is very important. It's where South Africa come in, and people question, why do we take American elections so seriously? Well, the reality is we may not vote in these elections, but whatever the result is, there are consequences for the rest of the world, and certainly for Africa and zoning into South Africa. So we were about to speak about, well, you kind of breezed over what it is that we should be looking for as a country from each of the candidates. Doesn't matter who you speak to, and I want to get your opinion on this. Most analysts say it would be better for us if Harris comes in. However, it stands right now, Trump could be the one. Why would it not be such a good move for us if Trump does come in?
Well, look, Donald Trump, when he was the president of the US before, didn't really care that much about Africa.
Yeah.
There's some things that he continued that existed already, programs like PEPFAR, etc. And there was nothing really new that came out from the Trump presidency. However, he did really, in terms of his Make America Great Again, put America first in terms of his foreign policy. He wasn't very keen on development assistance to Africa, on really, normalizing or balancing the trade relationship either between the US and Africa. But there was nothing really disruptive that particularly happened then. I think now there's going to be a much more difficult time for the continent under Trump presidency in terms of relations with China and him wanting the continent to really take a side. Pick a side, are you with us? Are you with them? I think around security issues as well. And then lastly, around things like AGOA, which is up for negotiation again in 2025. Around climate change, he's going to pull out of the Paris Agreement. He's probably going to reverse a whole lot of what has been decided in the last 4 years around mitigation efforts, around helping African countries to, to adjust to climate change, but also to clean energy. So all of those agreements that had been done in the last 4 years, I think, are severely under threat from a Trump presidency. The other thing that is under threat is international organizations. So the United Nations, for example, yes. Trump pulled back on a lot of the UN budget. So America is the biggest contributor to the United Nations budget. A lot of that was cut under the first Trump presidency. We expect that even more will be cut currently. And we know that there's a lot of countries on the continent that rely on the UN, not just on security issues in terms of peacekeepers, but also for development aid in education, in healthcare. And so that, I think, is a huge threat for the continent as well from a Trump presidency.
And it's going to be interesting to see how all of this pans out, because going back to the campaigns, Sophie, when we talk about issues such as security, looking at how the result is panning out at the moment, Kamala Harris's campaign very much focusing on domestic issues of security, for example. And it begs the question in terms of how the American electorate approached this particular election, and whether they, of course, then, does this mean that they saw Trump as one who would be more amenable to making Americans safer on the world stage.
Yes, indeed, because when he was talking about the war in Ukraine and the Middle East, he gave an impression that he is for peace. And he keeps talking about during his tenure, there was no major conflict, and America was pulling out of many areas where they were involved. But secondly, when you talk about multilateral organizations, the UN, we know that he had a strong view even then that what the contribution to the UN, I mean, it is on the shoulders of the United States of America. NATO, I can tell you, I think leaders in Europe right now, they are calling each other because now NATO is in trouble, because you are saying we can't continue to fund NATO as America and carry NATO when other countries are not doing the same. Oh, Gabriel's WHO. I don't think he is a happy man when he looks at the numbers. If Trump comes in, he is going to pull out of the World Health Organization. And he also spoke about the climate change. I mean, COP29, I think it is going to be a big issue behind the scenes if he is able to pull the numbers and he becomes president-elect, because the countries there, the G7 in particular, will be thinking where to from here with all the gains in terms of agreements on climate change. You would recall that the G7 in particular countries had made commitments of billions and billions of dollars, including offering South Africa such funds. So there's a lot of issues that you have to look at, and also, as you pointed out, AGOA. I mean, and what we must remember with AGOA, it doesn't only benefit the African countries and America. It does extend to those countries who are not part of the agreement. For example, when you look at some of the products that are being manufactured in South Africa, for example, those cars, American cars, it's part of AGOA. You get some of the products to assemble those cars, like the seats, from countries that are not necessarily members of this agreement, including in Europe. That's why the automobile industry, they like to set up assembly plants in South Africa, because when they send these products out of South Africa to the American market, they are able to tap into that market. So there's a lot.
There is a lot. There's a lot. And the immigration issue is another very big one.
Big one.
And I think people are exceptionally worried. I mean, these are the stories that we are starting to see on the sidelines, and people are speaking to, getting comments, particularly from those at the Mexican border, but those that are living within the borders of America and what it means for them. You remember the uncertainty during his presidency, but there's so much to unpack. We'll continue to do that. But at this point, we have to wrap this one.
Very interesting, because also the Middle East, we saw what Donald Trump did when he was president, moving the American embassy and, you know, exactly, and what is going to happen, you know, on all these fronts. But Dr. Mbete, Sophie Mokoena, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Interesting discussion. Still staying with you, bringing you the latest from the US elections.